Before going to study the structure of ovum, we should study the structure of Graafian follicle and in ovary. This is the vertical section of ovary showing Graafian follicle. The ovary is the primary female reproductive organ responsible for the production of ova. The ovary is attached to uterine wall by means of a ligament, and this ligament is called ovarian ligament, and this ovarian ligament is also called as mesovarium. Now ovary is generally protected by an outer covering, and this is called tunica albuginea. And below it is a fibrous connective tissue layer. Below that you come across a cellular layer, and generally this is generally called as the lining of ovary is by cuboidal epithelium, thus constitute germinal epithelium. This germinal epithelium is lined by cuboidal cells, which are responsible for the production of the ovarian follicles, the structural and functional units of ovary. Whereas internally the ovary shows an outer cortex enclosing what called the follicles, and inner medulla consisting of blood vessels, lymph vessels, etc. That is the middle part, that is nothing but medulla. Now the germinal epithelium, which is responsible for the production of structural and functional units of ovary, they are called ovarian follicles, and these ovarian follicles undergo maturation. Based on the maturation, they are classified into primary follicle, and then secondary follicle, and then it is transformed into a tertiary follicle, and matured ovarian follicle is called Graafian follicle. This is called Graafian follicle. Graafian follicle is defined as the matured ovarian follicle with the functional ovum is called Graafian follicle. Each ovarian follicle, it encloses the central ovum surrounded by cells of membrana granulosa, but the matured ovarian follicle with functional ovum is called Graafian follicle. The Graafian follicle is generally present toward the surface of ovary. That's why sometimes the Graafian follicle, because of present toward the surface of ovary, the ovary is bulged outside. It is spherical in structure, measuring about 250 to 300 microns in diameter, and this Graafian follicle is protected by an outer connective tissue covering. This outer connective tissue covering, that is called theca externa. Externa refers to outer, theca refers to layer. It is an outer connective tissue layer, that is called theca externa. Below that you come across a vascular layer. This vascular layer is called theca interna. Two layers, protective layers, theca externa and theca interna. Below theca interna there is a presence of cells of membrana granulosa. There are about 14 to 20 layers of cells are there, but I have mentioned only 2 layers, cells of membrana granulosa, that is 14 to 20 layers of cells are there. And this Graafian follicle encloses a cavity, and the cavity is called antrum. It is also called as antral cavity. Antrum or antral cavity filled with a fluid called liquor folliculi, also called as follicular fluid. Now the cells of membrana granulosa is extended into antral cavity in the form of a mound of tissue. In the form of a mound of tissue, this extension of cells of membrane granulosa into antral cavity is called cumulus ooporus. Is called cumulus ooporus. Cumulus ooporus. It is also called as discus proligerus, also called a germ hill, also called as vesicular hill, where it encloses the functional ovum. This is the structure of what called the ovum. And here, ovum is also, you already know, is a specialized haploid female gamete. It is produced in ovarian follicles of ovary through a process called oogenesis. It carries maternal characters or characters from mother, and lifespan is short. It lives only for 24 hours, and it do not contain what is called as, okay, the lifespan is 24 hours. Generally, it is spherical in shape with a definite polarity with the animal pole and vegetal pole, and this is protected by 3 types of membranes. We will study later. Now, this ovum is protected by one layer. This is called corona radiata. Corona radiata. The innermost layers of cumulus ooporus is called corona radiata. It is made up of columnar cells, and a clear zone between egg membrane and corona radiata is called zona pellucida. Zona pellucida, it is not a cellular layer, it is a gelatinous layer. It is a clear zone present between corona radiata and zona pellucida. And then you can see the egg membrane. This egg membrane is called oolemma. Oolemma, the cytoplasm, and all together called, and then the cytoplasm of the egg is called ooplasm. Ooplasm. So all together constitute the ovum. This is nothing but ovum. So all these structures, entire structures, which are generally all these structures together called Graafian follicle. This is called Graafian follicle, which are present. From primary follicle to Graafian follicle, it requires about the 14 days. On the 14th day of menstrual cycle, the ovum is released from ovary into body cavity by rupturing of Graafian follicle. By rupturing of ovary wall, the ovum is released from ovary into body cavity, and this process is called ovulation. It is under the control of hormone called LH, luteinizing hormone. Hence, LH is called ovulatory hormone. At this time, if sexual intercourse is performed and ovum is fertilized, if the ovum is fertilized, the Graafian follicle without corpus luteum transforms into corpus luteum. Corpus luteum is also called as yellow body, where the cells of membrana granulosa become glandular in nature, become secretory in nature. They secrete a hormone called progesterone. It is also called as pregnancy hormone. It is also called as hormone of maturation, and the cells become large, enlarge, and then becomes yellow in color. They are called luteal cells, and this structure is called corpus luteum. Corpus luteum is formed under the influence of hormone called LH. So this corpus luteum is continued till delivery of the baby. If the ovum is not fertilized, corpus luteum is formed and it undergoes disintegration and transforms into another structure that is called corpus albicans. Corpus albicans. This is about the structure of what called as ovary and the structure of Graafian follicle. Okay, and then we have to study the structure of Graafian follicle followed by the structure of ovum. I have explained about VS of ovary. VS of ovary. The VS of ovary, vertical section of ovary, is divided into outer cortex consisting of outer cortex consisting of follicular cells and inner medulla with blood vessels and stroma. The ovary is covered by tunica albuginea, a fibrous connective tissue layer, Below this, germinal epithelium made of cuboidal cells responsible for production of ovarian follicles. Ovarian follicles are the structural and functional units of ovary formed from germinal epithelium. The ovarian follicle consists of central ovum, surrounded by cells of membrana granulosa. Membrana granulosa cells change from flat to columnar cells, resulting in the formation of a cavity. The ovarian follicles grow from primary follicle to secondary follicle to tertiary follicle and matured follicle is Graafian follicle. Matured follicle is called Graafian follicle. Now the structure of Graafian follicle. Graafian follicle is defined as the matured ovarian follicle with functional ovum. The matured ovarian follicle with functional ovum is called Graafian follicle, named after Regner D. Graaf. Regner D. Graaf. It is spherical in shape, measuring about 250 to 300 microns in diameter. It is always present towards surface of ovary. Hence, ovary is bulged out. Ovary is bulged out. The Graafian follicle is covered by two layers. One, theca externa, a fibrous connective tissue layer, and second one, theca interna, a vascular layer formed from stromal cells, and it secrete estrogen, a female sex hormone. Theca interna, cells of membrana granulosa is present. About 14 to 20 layers of cells. Graafian follicle enclose a cavity called antrum or antral cavity, antrum or antral cavity filled with liquor folliculi, or follicular fluid or antral fluid secreted by cells of membrana granulosa, secreted by cells of membrana granulosa. The cells of membrana granulosa is extended into antral cavity in the form of a mound of tissue, called cumulus ooporus or discus proligerus or germ hill or vesicular hill, where it encloses functional ovum. From primary follicle to Graafian follicle require 14 days. 14 days. On 14th day of menstrual cycle, ovum is released into body cavity. The process is called ovulation. Under the influence of LH ends, LH is called ovulatory hormone. Is performed around ovulation, ovum get fertilized. If ovum is fertilized, fertilized. Graafian follicle. Graafian follicle without ovum, transforms into corpus luteum or yellow body. The cells of membrana granulosa become glandular and secretory cells called luteal cells. Which are yellow in color, secrete a hormone called progesterone or pregnancy hormone or hormone of maturation. The luteal cells are yellow in color due to the presence of a pigment called lutein. Progesterone is necessary for implantation of blastocyst, initiation and maintenance of pregnancy. Is necessary for implantation of blastocyst, initiation and maintenance of pregnancy. Hence, corpus luteum is continued till delivery of baby. If ovum is not fertilized, corpus luteum undergo regression and transforms into corpus albicans and finally disintegrates.